Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burckhardt. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is July 23rd, 2025, and we have got another fantastic show for you, but then don't we always? I am so excited to bring this person to you because she truly saved my bacon when I was needing to fill a slot during the Summer Read Suggestions episodes for a middle grade author. I had a wonderful person all lined up, but because of scheduling conflicts, they had to back out, and I was scrambling so hard, and I found this author online, and her books just looked so enticing that I had to reach out, and she agreed. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to the interview today. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burckhardt, Valerie Sherrard. The way that I always like to start my shows is I just have my guests tell everyone who you are and what you do.
My name is Valerie Sherrard, and essentially I write books for young people. I started writing a little bit later in life. My first book was published when I was in my 40s, but since that time I've had 34 books published for young people, and they range from young adult, middle grade. There's one chapter book so far, and 4 picture books. So my writing has really focused on young people.
Well, that's the one thing that I was really impressed with your work is you have such a nice selection through the different ages for young readers. And there's so many different subjects as well. It's just an amazing collection. I think any parent could find something for any child, no matter what age range that they have, from your collection of books.
Yes, there are categories that there aren't a whole lot in, but, middle grade, especially, and young adult, that sort of is my sweet spot, and I really like writing for that group. I struggle with picture books. It is actually easier for me to write a 55,000 word novel for young people than it is to write, say, a 800 word picture book. I really struggle with those, but yeah, there is something for everyone overall. Sometimes I hear from readers, I think there's an expectation if they've read, for example, if they've read my mystery series or if they've read a book about an event or whatever, and then they pick something up and instead of having the same style of writing and the same approach and so forth, it'll be like a different voice altogether. Mm-hmm. And I think readers sometimes expect writers to be consistent with the voice that they use when they're writing. I really struggle with that because I get bored after a while. I don't want to be recreating the same kind of one character type of deal, just telling different stories, with different names and so forth. I like to really create authentic characters from different times and in different circumstances.
We know, and I think you hit on something that a lot of authors really struggle with. Because for so many of us, we have so many stories and different worlds going on in our heads that we want to get out on the page. But whenever a reader finds a book that we've done that they really love, they just want more of that.
That is so true.
It's like here, we want to keep writing, say, okay, I want to do romance and I want to do mystery and I want to do a crime thriller and I want to do historical fiction. But each one of those fans in each one of those genres just want you to keep giving them what they're enjoying of your work.
Yeah. And I totally get that. And I sympathize with readers that feel cheated. I do understand the disappointment when a reader has an expectation. They've just been introduced to your work. They've enjoyed what you've written. They pick something else up and it's not the same at all. But I like to think, it's good for readers just to keep reading all of my books anyway. That was sort of like tongue in cheek, but, I do think that it's worth exploring other genres and other styles. It's just good for especially young people. It expands your mind and expands the types of genres and stories and situations that you are reading.
And I'm fascinated with the way that some of the authors actually deal with it. Like for me, I started writing under different pen names, and yes, there isn't that objection because I'm not writing the same thing all the time. They think it's different authors writing those things.
Okay. Well, that's very clever.
Yeah, it works, but it's also hard to advertise everything separately. It's so much easier whenever you can just advertise all your books as yourself.
Yes, yes, very likely.
So it's like every way of dealing with it has pluses and minuses. So it's one of those things that every author just kind of has to juggle whenever they want to do different genres.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I had always just written straight prose. And then a number of years ago, I had written a story, and the whole thing was written in prose. And I sent it to a publisher I was working with at that time. They contracted the story. And when it came time for the edit, I just found myself so unhappy with that story, just that it wasn't doing what I felt the story needed to do. And so I contacted the editor and I said to her, I would like to rewrite this in free verse. And I thought she'd object strenuously, but she just burst out laughing and she said, well, go ahead, give it a try. And I suppose she had nothing to lose because she had the prose to fall back on. But I did. I rewrote that book in free verse, and it was absolutely the voice that story needed. And it was published in free verse. It's called Counting Back from 9. And that book actually was shortlisted for the Governor General Award, which is one of the highest awards here in this country. So it proves that sometimes you just have to listen to your instincts and the way a story wants to be told, like the genuine, authentic voice of the story may not be what you initially think it's going to be.
Obviously, it was the right choice because that book is still sitting at number 730 in teen and young adult fiction on Amazon.com. And when you consider the millions of books that are in that category, and that this book came out in 2014, that is still sitting at a very high rank in that category.
I'm honestly just astonished to hear that. Like, I don't know too much about checking the ratings, and that's probably good because it could just be one more obsession. And honestly, like with 34 books, I just really don't have time to try and keep track of all of the ratings. But yeah, that's really nice to hear. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Now, I know that you happen to be a world traveler.
I have been a world traveler. I wouldn't say world, but I have been, outside of this country a number of times. I've lived in Europe, and I've traveled, to the States in a limited capacity. I like to travel. As a child, I lived in Germany for a couple of years. My dad was in the Air Force, and we were transferred there. And that was really a wonderful experience for me. In fact, it's because of the contact that I had in Germany that I eventually became a writer. Maybe I would have anyway, but I can't say that for sure. What happened, if I can tell you briefly, is my homeroom teacher, Mr. Al Flower, came up to my desk one day. This was in 6th grade, and he had a writing assignment that I had done. And he leaned down to my desk with the page, and he said to me, Valerie, this is really good. You could be a writer someday. And I cannot even tell you the feeling. It was like, you get that kind of flush of you're not even sure what, like this thrill and amazement that somebody was telling me such a thing. Like, it was the first time in my life that I can remember anybody ever saying I was good at something. And he continued to encourage me all through that year. And by the end of grade 6, I believed him. I believed that I would be able to write a book someday, if I wanted to do that. And so obviously I didn't rush into it, but when I never lost that dream all through the years. I knew that I wanted to write a book someday. I told people I was going to write a book someday. I believe it's possible some of them got tired of hearing it.
But I think that's just absolutely amazing. I kind of wonder if some teachers realize what an impact they can have on their students' lives.
You are so right. And for that very reason, it was important to me to try to reach out to my teacher. So when in my early 40s, with publication, looking very promising, I got thinking back to grade 6 and Laura West Germany and Mr. Lower. And I did a search. At that time, we didn't have like all the internet Googles and stuff that we have now. But I did a search on Canada 411, which is just essentially like a national phone book. And I looked for all of the A lowers in Canada, and I sent every one of them letters by snail mail.
Oh, wow.
And a week later, I got an email from my teacher, and we became, we stayed connected until he passed away a few years ago. But he picked up right where he left off, encouraging me and telling me, this is wonderful. And he was just one of those very special people.
That's amazing. I love that story. Now,
Mhm.
the school that you went to in Germany, was it a German school or was it on the Air Force Base?
It was on the base. Yeah.
So did you ever learn German while you were living here?
Well, I did as a young child. I learned the very important phrase immediately, which was haben Sie Eis?
That's
For
important.
non-German speaking people, do you have ice cream? I picked up a smattering, and it's a little bit interesting, potentially even embarrassing to admit that there are many songs, or a number of songs, I ought to say, that I can sing the whole song in German without any real solid understanding of the words I'm singing. And that was because while we were there, my parents purchased me a record by this singer named Heinze, and I thought he was pretty nice. So so I listened to those records. I don't know how my family didn't throw me out of the house. Like, I listened to those records endlessly. And after you hear them a certain amount of times, you can just sing right along. So I would be singing right along with these German songs without, I mean, I knew the gist of what some of them were about, but I certainly didn't, I had no full grasp of the language by any means.
That's great.
Yeah. So no, I don't speak German, but I can sing it. Language is very, very interesting, and I can only say that any of my books that have been translated, it's very fortunate that I, as the author, am not called upon to have any part of that process.
Well, it's like one of my friends has asked me, it's like, well, since you're learning German, are you going to translate your own books? I'm like, oh, no. Not even going to consider that. Thank you. What made you decide to focus all of your work on young readers and young adults?
Well, that was actually a very easy choice. They say to write what you know, and I know that's not like a across the board thing that applies in every circumstance, but for me, I had a background in working with young people. I had worked as the executive director of a group home for teenagers for 12 years. And aside from that, I also, over the years, had fostering experiences and had over 70 teenagers in my own home, not all at once.
That's good.
And some very short term, some quite long term. So like it was just an ongoing experience, but it seemed to me like that I felt very connected to young people, especially during those times. I'm not working with them anymore, but like I do with readers and contact and so forth. It just seems to be the thing that I wanted to continue. So that's why I was drawn to writing for young people, having something of an understanding of their world. And I wouldn't even say their thoughts, because that would be assuming something that you just cannot be.
That is so incredible, though, that you have fostered with so many kids. That has to be just amazing memories for you.
There are some very wonderful memories, Diane, and there are some very unhappy memories.
Hmm.
So it's a role that comes with challenges, but I mean, there are certainly rewards as well.
Have any of the experiences you had with these children make it into your books?
No. People really assume, I think, because of the nature of some of the stories that I've written, that they may be about a specific child or a specific incident or whatever, and that is absolutely never the case. I think like it would be terribly wrong to take advantage of what you know, like the good, the bad, and the ugly things about a person's past, and put that on the page. If there are stories that need to be told about them and their lives and so on, those are their stories to tell. What I do is I kind of take composites of more general things that happen to many children and situations that many children face. And I create a character that is not based on any one child, but just as I hope a realistic character that who then lives through these experiences.
I think that was kind of like what I was trying to allude to. It's more that since you had so many wide experiences with so many different children, do you think that this work that you did with foster children help you to build believable and relatable characters? Not necessarily a specific child, but just your experience with all of them.
Yes, I hope so. When you're writing, and especially if you're writing first person, which is my most natural fit, like I really like to write from a first person point of view. So I'm speaking as the child and whatever age or genre they are. And yes, you want that child to be an authentic child. Building the character before I begin writing is really important to me. So I feel like it's a creation, but a creation that feels like very real to me in a sense.
What is your process whenever you're creating one of the worlds for your books?
Well, for creating worlds, I usually am pretty tame and I'll have them set in a city or in a town, very often not named or given a fictitious name. Sometimes there are actual locations like that are real. I have 3 books set, for example, here in Miramichi, where I live. Obviously, this is a real place. I've got one set in the Ottawa area, and there are some that are set in, like, let's say, for example, in a province, but not a real location. There's a place called Junction out west that doesn't exist, but it is the location for 2 of my books set out in the west. So world building isn't so much a thing as building the situation and the character. The character is key. Like I have to understand the characters, the way they think, the things that impact them, their biases, their hopes, the things they're anxious about, all of those types of things, their sense of humor, what kind of people they're drawn to, their friends, just all kinds of things about the character themselves, so that when I begin to write the story, the voice of the character, especially written in the first person, as I said I usually do, does come across as authentic, especially dialogue. I really feel it's so important, like that my character speaks as they are. It's tempting when you're writing dialogue just to get the information that you want in that, exchange across. And it's important to me that the dialogue is written from that person's point of view, and that the responses coming, say, from a close friend, a parent, a teacher, whomever, are also authentic to a separate character, so that everyone's dialogue isn't the same.
Now, do you follow any specific plot outline, like Save the Cat or some of the different ones that you can use with different plotting software that tells you have to have a conflict in this one, you have to have a resolution here? Or do you just let your instincts guide you in the story?
Certainly, there are things that you expect in a story. For example, a story.
Yeah, yeah.
You want there to be usually a problem that the main character is dealing with, something. There needs to be something to create tension or to create intrigue if it's a mystery, that type of thing. And that should move along in a certain way. And there needs to be subplots, like other things that are happening, because otherwise the story just is flat. You need to flesh it out with other things that are going on. And somehow, if you can weave those together so that these subplots support the main plot, that's great. They don't always, but then you've got the story arc, of course, and there are different arcs. And it can be like, I tend toward the one where there's situation and it goes on and on and on. And then there's sort of a resolution and then it wraps up. That's a very simplified version. But sometimes your character has things, maybe things are very difficult and then they get better and you feel happy and celebratory toward what's taking place with them. And then it all falls apart. Then the reader and the writer feel the despair and the weight of, like, it looked so hopeful and now it's back into a mess kind of thing. And then there's sort of like a second resolution, which is almost never as powerful as the first one, but is the beginning of a new rise where, you feel the hope, you see that, something is happening, but it's not fairy tale-ish. I really shy away from the fairy tale-ish type of ending. Some of my books end on kind of sad notes, and I hear from readers about that. Everybody likes a happy ending. But I always remember the movies and stories that have stuck with me through the years from, really from childhood, the ones that made the largest impression and that left me with emotions that lingered for a long time were not the happily ever after endings. They were almost universally the endings that left me feeling, I don't know if unsatisfied is the word, but certainly sad in some degree, or wishing that things had been different, though they weren't. And I know that's a risk in writing for young people. They don't always appreciate the fact that, well, maybe this character's not going to make it, kind of thing. Or maybe you aren't going to find out the answer to what happened to this character, and that's deliberate. If that is the case, that's deliberate. It's not like I forgot to tie up the major thread of the story. But yeah, there's just a lot of different ways to craft a story. It has to feel right, I think, to the reader. And you have to resist the voices that say, this will sell better if you do this. Because if it isn't true to the story that you're writing, then you just ought not to do it.
I definitely agree. And especially even about the not always wanting a happy ending. My favorite book that I found when I was 16, it was like a young adult coming of age kind of story. It's called Silver Medal Lover by Tanith Lee. And it was a fantastic book. I still read it every couple of years. I have read that thing so many times. I practically have it memorized by now. But the ending is so heart-wrenchingly sad.
Yeah.
And I love that about the book because for me, it was a realistic ending. It was the ending that was right for that story.
Yeah.
It is the only book that has ever made me cry, and I cry every time I read it. And it makes me mad. And I love that book like nothing you can imagine.
Yeah. And I mean, I get that. And I think like the stories that can move us to tears, whether the tears are out of sadness or whether the tears are just like we are so powerfully moved, I think like those are the stories that genuinely stay with you, and those will be the ones that are favorites.
Oh, yeah.
And that's sort of comedy aside, because humorous books fall into a different category, and humorous books typically have, if not necessarily 100% happy endings with everything nicely tied up, at least there's a frivolity that allows for those things at the end.
Now, and you're not just a fiction author, you also have some nonfiction. And I was really enjoying reading through your book, More Than Words, narrating the complex world of communication. I think this is something that not only would speak to young adults, but when I was reading through some of this, I was thinking, I know sales groups that could use this book as well in professional settings.
I've had a lot of comments from people saying like, adult groups could use this as well. It's on communication. It's very basic. It's written in kind of a lighthearted approach because it's geared toward the younger age group, and you need to keep them engaged. But all of the content, I agree 100%, and especially in this day and age where young people are so electronically connected that they don't have the same interactions and don't understand necessarily how the different interactions in communication take place or ought to take place, or they don't necessarily even understand how they work. What does it mean? What are these things? So, More Than Words does, it covers, well, from the back cover here, body language, hand gestures, facial expressions, all have something to say. They're the silent signals that we send. And this talks about communicating effectively virtually and in person, with more confidence and few understandings. And it's written in a fun way. There's a lot of humor in it, and there are some little illustrations and cartoons. There's group activities at the end of each chapter. There's a summary at the end of each chapter with main points. There's a lot in it, I hope, that would keep young people reading, because communication is a skill that they are sorely uninformed on, I think would be the word. And it can't be a bad thing. I didn't know what I was doing when I first started writing this book. I mean, nonfiction was not something I had done really. And so I made a few kind of pathetic attempts to put together like a sample and send them out to editors, and those weren't happy results. So I didn't know they were pathetic until I got the answers back. But then I had a friend who writes fiction and a great deal of nonfiction. And I contacted her and I said, like, would you be interested in partnering on this story? And she said, yes. So she did the research outlines, gave me lots of guidance. I did the actual writing in the book because you want continuity in the text.
Mm-hmm.
But her contribution was like hugely important too. So we share credit for this book, Natalie Hyde and I, and the artwork is done by David Jardine, and it's also like an important part of the book. And so that's a 3-person effort. But I think we turned out like a really good, solid book on communication that, here's my commercial, should be in every classroom in North America.
I tend to agree with that. It's like I was even highlighting the section on to blurt or not to blurt, because that is still a problem for me.
I think there is something in there about blurting, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little while since we wrapped that up. But a book that's so dear to my heart, Dianne, is one that came out a couple of years ago, and it's written in a different kind of style than is customary for me. Like I said, I usually write in first person. This was written in third person because it required that. Sometimes you can tell a whole story through one person's point of view. Sometimes you need a wider range. And in this case, I did need a wider range. And so I moved to third person to tell this story. And I think that it worked out well. Although you don't always fully achieve the emotional immediacy that you can get with a first person story, I think that the emotions and the experiences came through fairly effectively in writing A Bend in the Breeze. I wanted to create a world apart, a place where anything was kind of possible. So I started out with this uncharted island and a village of people who have been untouched by the outside world, including the fact that they have never, ever had a visitor. However, they have questions because there's an island legend that tells of a visitor who's known to them as the long-awaited. And the long-awaited is going to be brought to them one day by a bend in the breeze, hence the title. It's natural then, when this little girl, 11-year-old girl, Pascal Chardon, she mysteriously arrives on a lifeboat, and she has everybody wondering, like, who is this girl, and how did she get here, and more importantly, is she the long-awaited? Well, Pascal doesn't really have a full understanding of how she got there. She'd been on a ship, a storm came up, somehow she ended up in a lifeboat, and she ended up drifting along and finding her way accidentally to this island. So while everyone's wondering, she begins to wonder too. And the legend dictates like that a certain number of days have to pass before the identity of the long-awaited is revealed. So while everyone wonders, Pascal, who initially is sure that this cannot be her, because she's just a little girl, she knows she's a little girl, but mysterious things start to happen, and some of them kind of point toward her. And she begins to wonder, like, could I be the long-awaited? And so if you want to know if she is or isn't, you'd obviously have to read the book, because that would be a spoiler, and that really isn't my objective here. But I will say response to the story has been very good. In fact, one reviewer said, to my great delight, this is a quote, "Think of A Bend in the Breeze as The Little Prince meets Island of the Blue Dolphin. So, like, I had no objection to that comparison.
Yeah, that is amazing. I love that. And I love both of those books. So that gives you a
Yeah.
really good idea.
Yes, and another reviewer said the characters are quirky, fun, and interesting. The world Sherrard creates is believable, curious, and joyful, yet full of human imperfection and emotion. There was magic throughout without it ever overshadowing the humanity and ability of ourselves to put ourselves in young Pascal's place. So it was very kindly treated by reviewers.
Well, and just to add to that, though, the listeners would not have any way to know this, but I had another middle grade reader set for this episode, but because of scheduling conflicts, they had to back out. And I was desperately searching for another middle grade author to replace them when I found A Bend in the Breeze online. And I started reading the sample that was available for that. And just from reading the sample that you could read online, I sought you out and was practically begging you to please come be on this episode for me because I just loved your writing style in that book. I mean, everything from the cover art to the story and even the prologue, the explanation that you give. I wanted you to be a part of this for the summer reads.
Well, I appreciate that so much. I can't even tell you. Like, I consider this to be the best book of anything I've written, and I just want people to love it.
I think they will if they read it. And to that point, would you like to share a little bit of your book?
I can share. This is a hard book to choose a little spot from without giving anything away, but I'll tell the audience that's listening this, that there is each person in the village has a role, and this one particular young man, his role is the village healer. He's kind of the apprentice healer, and he's still finding his way along. His name is Zeril Duckpuddle, and there's a small problem with the fact that Daryl Zuckpuddle is the village healer, and that is that Daryl Zuckpuddle is also really, truly a hopeless hypochondriac. So here we have just a situation where the alarm has been raised. They are expecting that, I won't get into how, but anyway, they're expecting that somebody in the village is going to die during the story. Anyway, so it was natural that Tajay's older inhabitants would be most occupied with thoughts of death. It would be inaccurate to suggest it was not on virtually everyone's mind that day. In particular, the apprentice healer, Zeril Duckpuddle, was struggling to remain calm. He was not having much success. Between the wee hours of the morning when he awakened and early afternoon, Zeril experienced more symptoms than he had even known existed. There were chills and aches, fevers and cold sweats, and a terribly inflamed throat. His head throbbed, his nose ran, his feet suddenly felt swollen, and then so did his tongue. He fanned himself one moment and clutched a heavy blanket the next. He found red blotches on his torso and pale white patches on his legs. The list went on and on. It went on so long, in fact, that it was difficult for the poor youth to keep up with his own diagnosis. He'd contracted a deadly water virus or scratched himself on a poisonous plant. Perhaps it was a rare lung infection, or he'd consumed some toxic bit of food. He was certain his heart would fail at any moment. If, that is, some form of paralysis didn't first cause him to fall face first into the dirt and suffocate. The causes and means of Daryl's impending demise were many, and each of them was dreadful to contemplate. Not for one moment did the young man suspect his symptoms were nothing more than figments of his imagination brought on by worry and fear. To him, they were very real and therefore terrifying. It was not long after lunchtime, not that he'd eaten a bite, when a rap came at his door. For one dreadful second, Zeril was convinced it was Death. He had just enough time to feel surprise that Death had the good manners to knock when the door swung open and Kenta's familiar face appeared. So that's just like a little snippet of poor Zerald Duck Puddles suffering on the day that the island is expecting that somebody's going to be leaving them.
I love that because I think it's such a great depiction of how broad your characters are. I mean, you have such imaginative characters.
I always like characters who are a little bit ridiculous because I just feel such a relationship to them.
I love that.
Thank you.
So now seems like a perfect time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I'm just really seriously nosy and love asking these kinds of questions.
Oh,
Are you ready?
I am, well, hopefully. I mean, like, can I say I have no clue if I don't know the answer to a question?
You can absolutely say that.
Alrighty.
So, but these are just fun little simple questions for people to get to know you as a person.
All right.
So we already know that you live in North America now. What
Mhm.
is your favorite thing about being back there after living in Germany?
Well, Germany was a long time ago, and it was just like an interlude really in my life. So I never felt the connection to Germany that I may have felt, for example, like I grew up in the central part of the country and now live on the East Coast. And, I certainly had a strong attachment to the central part of the country more so. I think like your feeling of community changes, and I think it changes like where you feel you belong and your comfort level and everything over time as everything becomes familiar and as you form friendships and alliances and all of those things. So I think that wherever you are, given time, can feel very comfortable and like home.
I would tend to agree with that. I've lived in Denmark and now Germany, and yeah, it like takes a while to get used to everything that's different, but then once you're used to it, even though it is still different than what you grew up with, it feels comfortable or at least familiar.
Absolutely.
So, question 2, is there anything that you can think of that you miss about Germany?
Oh, yes. Oh, Germany is so beautiful. And there were all these castles you could, abandoned castles on hills you could walk through. I don't know
Hmm.
if that's still the case, but you could back when I was there. And the lines on the houses and the way the houses look, like the construction is just, it's so charming
Hmm.
compared to, I think, many structures in North America
Yeah.
lack the charm that many European places have because the European places are, have such a longer and more varied history.
Yeah, I do love the architecture around here.
Mm, beautiful, so beautiful.
So, question 3, do you ever repeat read a book?
Do I ever reread a book?
Hmm.
I do. I mean, aside from the rereading of one's own work when you're going through the editing and copywriting and proofreading processes, by which time you usually despise the book. um, yes, I have read. There are a number of books that I have read several times.
So, question 4, whenever you go to a movie theater, is there a snack that you always have to get when you go?
Of course, I'm not a crazy person. Uh, one must have popcorn. One cannot go to a movie theater without having popcorn. I can't even imagine why anyone would suggest such a thing. I see them with their bars and their niblets and their other things oh, and movie theater nachos and hot dogs and things like that was just these are just anathema and should be outlawed altogether. People should eat popcorn at the movies, and not just for the popcorn but for the popcorn smell that fills the air around you and contributes so significantly to your experience. I may have sounded a little bit unbalanced talking about popcorn.
Well, I'm the same way. I have to have popcorn. I will skip dinner just so I can have popcorn at the movies.
Of course, sometimes popcorn is a perfectly acceptable dinner, even
And
not at the movies.
So, your last question. I've been asking this of every author this year because I'm creating a list to go in our year-end book buying guide of recommendations of books from our authors. So, is there a book, whenever somebody asks you for a book recommendation, is there a specific author that you always go to?
I'm going to have to say Mahtab Narsimhan. She's a writer. She writes like a lot of different things. She has picture books too. Like there's one, The Boy in the Banyan Tree, that's just absolutely wonderful. But she writes such vivid stories. Like they're so evocative. When you're reading, you can really feel the worlds that she's created. She writes like a range of different things. And she writes for reluctant readers and readers who are keeners, and she's got a wide range of books. So yeah, Mahtab Narsimhan, that's Mahtab, and the last name is Narsimhan. Yeah, I really recommend her.
Thank you so much for the recommendation.
My pleasure.
Now, one thing that I did want to ask you too about your books, do you ever do special editions with dyslexic fonts? Fonts that are made to help people who have dyslexia read easier?
I don't know. I'm not really familiar, like to my knowledge, I think my publisher, I'm working currently with DCB for young readers.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with a number of publishers over the years, but I think there's some talk of that font being adopted in some of their publications. I'm not sure how the choice is made for which book and so forth, but that would not ever be a decision that would be mine to make.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as the publisher, they do all the market testing, and they would see like which ones would be best for this group of readers, and then they would try to produce something that would meet the needs of that particular group.
Well, I know there's actually a fairly large group of authors who have never even seen this font before. So, and I learned about it last year at the Frankfurter Book Mesa from Sweet Cherry Press. It's a publishing house in the UK. And I didn't even know it existed until then. So I'm really fascinated about this now. And I'm always asking people whenever they have middle grade books if they have done any special editions with that font.
Like you, Diane, I have not known about this font for that long, but I have been aware, like in the industry connections that I have, that there's some attention being paid to producing work like that. And what a great thing. Anything that supports and helps others.
Yeah.
So that everybody can enjoy the books.
Well, in case there are any indie authors out there who are interested in this, the font is called Open Dyslexic, and it is a free and open source font that you can download and use for free. It was put out by the creator, I'm going to say his name wrong, Abelardo Gonzalez, and I will have a link in the description of today's podcast. He's the developer, and he chose to put it out without any licensing fees so that more kids can find it easier to read books.
Isn't that beautiful? That is wonderful. And bravo to him for being that kind of person, because there are far too few of them out there, really.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, where can people find you so that they can follow you and learn about all of your publications coming in the future?
Well, I have a blog, very neglected blog. I basically post that I have a new book out. I post something about that. But I mean, really, I'm boring. So if anybody wants to know anything about my work, that's just about all that might be interesting to them. Most of my books, or many of my books, are on the blog. So it's just Valerie Sherrard Blogspot.
And there will be a link to all of your information in the description of today's podcast, as well as on our website at burckhartbooks.com, so that it will be very easy for everyone to go find you and your work.
I really appreciate that. Now come find me, people. You know, Diane has gone to all this work and spent all this time talking to me. You know, reward her by following everything that she does, and also, you know, check out my blog.
Thank you so much for doing this. You seriously saved my bacon by agreeing to do this. I wanted a middle grade reader author so bad, and you were the perfect person to fill this spot.
I am so thankful for this opportunity, and I appreciate so much that you reached out to me, and I kind of feel like over this last hour and a half, we've become besties.
We have way too much in common.
we kind of do.
So there you have it, folks. My incredible interview with the wonderful Valerie Sherrard. Be sure to go out and read A Bend in the Breeze. It is an amazing book. It is so engaging, and the characters in this book are just so imaginative. I absolutely loved it. I ended up finishing up this book on my trip to Chile here this last 2 weeks, and it was just a wonderful read, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you have middle grade readers who enjoy adventure and fantastic characters, they will love this book. So be sure to go and check it out, and check out her other works, because she has just got such a wide variety of offerings in her collective works. You're going to find something that you like. Now, I'm going to go ahead and cut things short for today. I'm not going to do a lot of blathering because, if you know me, you are not going to be surprised by this. Our very first night when we were in Chile, I tripped and fell down. And it still hurts. So I'm going to go put my leg up and rest because, yeah, I actually have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. So I'm going to go rest, and you go and enjoy Valerie Sherrard's books, and I will see you all next Wednesday. So you know what time it is, folks. It's time for you all to go forth. Be very careful as you do that and have a great Wednesday.